Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this special edition of FinStep Asia's Token Bytes. My name is Musheer Ahmed. I'm the founder and managing director of FinStep Asia and the host of the Token Bytes podcast. Today with us, as we reach a new milestone of 40,000 subscribers on YouTube, is a special guest who will talk about otherworldly things, literally. Someone I've known for a few years and was also based in Hong Kong for a while. Alexandra Vidyuk, who is the general partner at Beyond Earth Ventures. Alexandra, welcome to Token Bytes. How are you doing today?
Hi, Musheer. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And congratulations on 40,000 subscribers.
Thank you so much. And it's the honors all ours to have you on this. I mean, look, I think most of us in our generation and beyond, even I would dare say, most people in the world look up to the skies and wonder about space. And, we now have had over 60 years since the landing on the moon. But, I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm wearing a Darth Vader t-shirt, which is not visible yet, but that's the head of Darth Vader there. But space has always been a fascination. But your career journey did not start necessarily with space or deep tech. So I'd love to hear what was your journey like, university, work life, and then how you got into this sector. And we'll talk about Beyond Earth Ventures as well. So over to you.
Thanks. I love your t-shirt, by the way. I also putting Occupy Mars today, but you can't see it, but yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Thematic.
Yes.
Yeah, no, so maybe just kind of a very brief, like what is deep tech? I think, it's a very wide scope, right? So I think like what does it mean? It means like, we invest in companies which do space tech, energy, robotics, advanced materials, and future of computer. That's kind of our focus. So like a very hardcore deep tech. So and I've been doing it for the last 3 years. But as you mentioned, like when we met, I was actually in fintech, and I was like still doing like digital assets kind of and fintech startups. So I think so I have a degree in physics. So I wanted to be a scientist when I was a kid, and
okay.
It never happened because, when I graduated, it was 15 years ago, half of my class went to work for McKinsey and like other management consulting. And another half went to work for banking. And I was the one who went to banking. So, and I was like, okay, fine, it's great. It's like, it's amazing job, glamorous. You fly in business class from London to Tokyo, New York, and I was like, but 10 years later, I found myself in a situation where I was like, oh, it's a bit boring, I don't actually use my physics degree. I mean, a lot of things what we do in banking is basically making rich people more rich, right? And I was like, I started asking my questions, and then that moment I moved from London to Hong Kong when we met, right? And I was like, that was COVID. I didn't have many friends, and I was like kind of feeling like, kind of more and more kind of start questioning myself. And I had a startup in fintech, which, still doing great, by the way. So like I'm kind of more like an advisor there now. So, and at some point I was like, okay, so how do I combine my physics degree, my career in finance and fintech startup? Like, so what's the best thing? And then deep tech VC came as a natural choice. So that's kind of combining my tech expertise, but also understanding of finance and the world of startups, the world of VC. So that's I would say like on a kind of overview of what led me to that place. Yeah.
I mean, look, you were a chief data officer for wholesale bank. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, a bit of an allergy, and then it's that switch, right? And I know what you mean about when we get into banking, there are a lot of these elements which are very BAU, as it were, and not exciting. I'm an engineer too, but I started my career in trading, so there's nothing about physics beyond looking at high speed connectivity for my trades to go through. But it's kind of that analytical element, right? And physics has so many touch points in our day-to-day lives, and it's fascinating. And I'm drawing an analogy. I'm sure last week you've seen I'm going to mispronounce this, but Hilo AI and the videos for the cat Olympics and the animal Olympics.
Yes, yes.
And that the physics and how they've managed all of this, right, to be able to incorporate that into this. And you guys do, and I want to come to space tech, and that's going to be our main conversation, but you guys do a lot of other elements in terms of deep tech as well. How are you seeing, does this help your physics background, that strong science STEM background, when you're evaluating AI companies, and somebody comes and says, we have this dynamic AI startup that can elevate visual experiences? Does that help you as well?
Yeah, no, I think so I don't do AI like unfortunately, but like it's also like no, it's a fascinating area. So kind of in terms of what's happening, like, so AI is killing some of the sectors and AI is accelerating some of the sectors. So for me, deep tech is a sector which accelerated by AI and robotics. So think about everything what's happening in space, right? So you need to manage trajectories of satellites. It used to be all manual, now it's all AI. What will happen, like, robots producing something in orbit or on the moon, or kind of, some kind, that's used to be all very basic robotics. Now you have humanoids, you have that's kind of accelerated. In terms of the like, in deep tech, you have to have some engineering or science background, right? So, and some of the founders, like, they don't even want to talk to VCs if you don't have PhD. So I don't have PhD, but I do have two other team members in our team who have PhD. And I sometimes say like, oh, but how would you understand my business if you don't have PhD? That's like, and like, my co-founder, he was like, my whole life I was hiding to have PhD because PhD is like a label, or you like a scientist. But now finally, like, 15 years later, he can use it like as a benefit. And I was like, yeah, so you're in the right place now. Yeah. So I think that's how I see it. Yeah.
So what drew you specifically to space tech, from being a chief data officer in one of the world's largest banks to space tech and deep tech, where you're gonna, as you said, be challenged about your scientific knowledge and experience, which has been a while since you did that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, of course, as a personal passion, right, as well. I mean, similar to you, I spent like my whole childhood reading the books and watching sci-fi movies, right? That's kind of what drives me when it's like everything goes wrong, right? And when I think like I'm going to die, homeless under the bridge, then the passion kicks in, right? But I think they also like, I want to make money, right? So I'm a VC. I want to make money for myself. I want to make money for my investors, and the way how we look at it now is like the way how we've chosen these deep tech sectors is always a combination of is it the right time to invest today? Why, right? Which sectors we have to invest? What are the, is it like, the technological trends, policies, geopolitical moments? Kind of, it has to be a combination. In terms of space, for example, right? So first of all, thanks to Elon Musk, who's been pushing rockets like last 23 years to space, now we have a very cheap launch vehicle, right? So Falcon 9 is the current one, which you can probably send something like in maybe like 1.7K per kilo dollars, right? So it's like, it's not super expensive. Starship, which will come soon, hopefully would be around $100 per kilo. That basically means almost like any teenager can use like pocket money to send something to space, right? So that's
in some careers,
exactly. And that's just one company, and there's like a number of competition which is pushing the price down as well, right? So that basically unlocked a multiple business models, a multiple unit economics, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is the budgets, right? So like investing in the US, I always say that my main market is US, so 70% of my investments and pipeline coming from the US, and my fund is US based as well. So now it's like you have obviously like the Golden Dome. If you read the news what Trump is doing, have budgets, of course there's a lot of changes now, US government, US administration, but the budgets is still defense, energy, NASA, that's all still there. We're talking here about multi-billion, even like 100+ billion budgets for the next 3 to 4 years, right? And they're not going to go to big corporation like Boeing or Airbus. They're going to go to startups, right? So for me, that's a sign that that's kind of normally in the US, we say, I put $1, the government put $3. So I basically have like, multiply my investment, and it's all non-dilutive funding typically, right? So the government doesn't take any equity. So that goes to us as investors. So that's kind of a wave which we are kind of using here. The geopolitical tension between China and US creating competition, right? So, everyone wants to be first back to the moon, back to the Mars, or like first time go to the Mars. Who has better satellites, who has better defense capabilities, who has better network, right? So that's that kind of thing. And I think, when I started doing space like 3 years ago, and I was like, oh, space is just rockets and satellites, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize like that moment that now this is like to public eye, this is still probably what's happening, but in reality, space has so many implications in other industries. For example, data centers in space. You have like pharma labs in space which produce new type of medicine, a new type of anti-aging or longevity stuff. You have kind of how we improve navigation for data, like, for drones and robots on Earth. And this is all not just specifically, I would say, space, but it's kind of space enabling other industries. And this market is huge, right? And also, if you think about what do we need to do, if my fund name called Beyond Earth, so it does what it says. We want to develop economy beyond Earth. So anything which can help us to build economy, technology, innovation, in orbit, on the moon, on the Mars, but also we want to have a very stable revenue on Earth, right? That's not just, you don't need rockets for that. Rockets already exist, right? But what you need energy sources, you need robots, you need smart, advanced materials, and you need to have, future, like, new chips, new photonics, and like, everything. So that realization came to me as well, that, while space is my big dream, big ambition, big passion, which I have, that you don't just invest in rockets and satellites, but you actually invest in like other technologies which kind of enable or surround space tech. Yeah.
And this is fascinating for me, right? And I think, and I'm sure with the returns you get, you could then book a flight to space with Virgin or Amazon, or even with Musk on the way to Mars. But it's something that is now becoming so much realistic. When we talk about Blue Origin or Virgin Atlantic offering these rights to the edge of space, you can qualify that technicalities later, but it's no longer a $100 million conversation. It's in hundreds of thousands of dollars conversation, right? Maybe a couple of million, but just if you take inflation, everything else is not too much for a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity, which is the accessibility to humans to space is, I think, increasing, even though it is for the super elite at this stage. But the other thing I wanted to take as they say, double click on and get your views on. For most part, we always assume that space programs, putting things out in space, will either be driven by sovereigns, especially the major countries, the G20, the G7, maybe G20 as an extension, and very large corporates who have specific, have a huge budget, right? So when you are looking at startups, right, how do you see them competing against some of these very large organizations, Elon Musk included, when it comes to being able to grow, being able to get those right projects, being able to scale, because a lot of these require a high amount of capital to build these products as well. Right? Just given the failure rate cannot be there, essentially. So, yeah.
Yes. So when you say, when we say that, used to be like the government only kind of dominated industry, right?
Correct,
So
yeah.
I think probably if you think about the budget which spent on space, this is still 70% government dominated, right? But the way how it works is, like, for example, NASA's budget is approximately like 30 billion a year. That has been like last couple of years, right? So ESA's budget, ESA is European Space Agency, is like, 16 billion a year for like several years, right? So they don't do anything by themselves. They do some kind of research missions, but what they do is they think about how do we build ecosystem, right? So, okay, so someone needs to produce satellites. Someone needs to write software for them. Someone needs to think about, okay, solar panels for satellites. Someone needs to think about robots. And so they kind of create these contracts and grants opportunities for different startups. And then while the market is still small for some of this, the government will support them like first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years until the commercial tractions, go up, right? And so, for example, I always like to say that we have some companies like Xona Space System was just announced yesterday, the investment, so I can now officially talk about that. So it's a company which repropagating GPS signal from the geostationary orbit to LEO orbit and then kind of to the Earth, which improves the accuracy from 3 meter to 10 centimeters. So imagine if your GPS on your iPhone, like on your any device you have, will be like exactly with accuracy like 10 centimeters, right? That will change the way how many industries will work, right? So and think about how robots inside data centers will do, how tractor will do, how agriculture, vehicles would be like better, right? More kind of, everything, right? But of course, the first client is a government, right? And the government says, okay, I mean, we want to know, kind of what's happening with like our, whatever, like kind of defense assets or whatever, right? So of course, and then they got this huge contracts, right? And then while they're building the proper set kind of constellation and proper commercial product, they have government support. And that's exactly what I want to see, right? So, I mean, of course, think about how much revenue they can do if they, get into the every iPhone, right? The new chip, but that will be a long-term project, because when you talk about deep tech, it's not something which you can do like, vibe code over weekend. There's something which takes typically a lot of R&D, and then the sales cycle is longer because it's mainly B2G or B2B, right? So, okay, fine, you have 3-4 years, government will give you some money, you accelerate your product, you build what you need, you build your build relationship with your clients, and when you have the commercial traction, you switch from government contracts to big commercial. So we always try to see that path, right? So, just one government contract is not enough. And, that's a lot of people make this mistake as well. Like, oh, that's something, the thing about in space tech, in the deep tech as well, right? So I mean, it's probably space is mainly, there's a lot of companies which will make the founder rich, but not the VC rich, right? So we need to think about the companies which will make VC rich as well, because VC need to make our investor rich as well, right? So that's kind of that's a selection process we normally choose as well. And for kind of, you're absolutely right. So there's some research R&D project. There are some small companies which will be bootstrapped or will be like have like a couple of government contracts. They're not VC models. They are great what's happening, and the founders will get rich. But we're looking at a specific subset of them, which it's still very difficult to find good companies. They're always oversubscribed. They're always busy. They're always like we need to kind of find them and be like in the golden list of VCs to get to the cap table. But it's a hard job, of course. But that's what we're looking for. That's my every day from kind of all day. That's what I do.
And what is like, so this is the fascinating thing, right? It is, having been in a bit of fintech, etc., for the last 10 years, you see that you always need that encouragement, even if you're looking at future down the line. In some instances, those returns are going to take quite some time, and then the multiplier impact can very much be a hockey stick once there's a trigger point. And that's the element about how do you see your LPs reacting to this, right? I mean, they obviously, I'm assuming, would be much more realistic than investing in a digital assets meme coins conversation, which is expecting a 10x within a few days, versus this, which is going to be slow burn, literally going into a few years. How do you see the psyche and the approach of the LPs, and what kind of LPs do you think are typically attracted to space and deep tech venture capital.
Yeah, so if people come to me and say, "Oh, I used to invest in meme coins and get return like overnight, or at least like 18 months," I would say, "Sorry, my fund is not for you," right? I mean that's very clear. So and deep tech, I mean, so deep tech, if you think about like if you look at latest BCG McKinsey report studies, and I'm happy to share some of the links. So like deep tech is kind of return is almost double compared to traditional tech. Right? Because deep tech is a transformational technology, which is it's not just a software which will fix one's kind of pain point in an enterprise and then scale it, and that's all. Deep tech can transform multiple industries, and that's it's an outsized return. It's patient capital in the same time, right? So I mean, typical deep tech fund time is like 10 years. Right.
Correct.
So we always try to kind of in the back of my mind, I always try to think about 5, 7, but I just want to keep it like 3 years just in case if some of the companies will not scale as fast as we want, right? Plus now there's a lot of most of the investors want to have some liquidity, so there's kind of options to kind of sell your stake after 5 years or whatever. That's something which we do as well. But in terms of I think so far what most of our investors are either like exited founders, C-level people, like some small family offices. So people who have a understanding of like, first of all, legacy and some kind of STEM attractiveness. So, okay, most of them studied STEM and say, okay, I studied physics, math, engineering, whatever. But I work something different now. So, but I want to be part of this growing ecosystem, be part of this trend. And, deep tech is, I know, look at top 10 companies in the world today in terms of the market cap. 9 of 10 is deep tech, right? So do you think you're going to see next Google, next Amazon? No, we're going to see another Nvidia, we're going to see another SpaceX, right? So this is like I think this is the trend where we already see what's going on, right? So, and people want to have exposure to that market, right? And also kind of that's one side. Another side is a legacy, and people think, okay, I mean, of course, there's Elon Musk who wants to build Mars colony. That's an extreme legacy. But other people as well think, okay, we need a new energy. We're building more and more data centers, and I want my kids to be in a greener, better world, right? So how do we invest in energy which is innovating, like maybe fusion or nuclear or hydrogen or perovskite technology, for example? That's exactly what we do. So we do invest in this type of things. Funny enough, there's a lot of interesting. So our fund also we use AngelList platform, so we accept crypto payments as a part of our like as a so a lot of crypto and digital assets people actually came to us, and I think the mentality is very similar. Is because so innovation first of all, and second kind of anarchy, right? So kind of we want to create a new world, right? And like I think there's kind of I don't know maybe how to explain that like well, but there's kind of this think about we want to do something completely brand new, we want innovation, that's a similarity in thinking. And I think it's especially a lot of people who made a lot of money, like early Bitcoiners, they're like, yeah, of course, but I have a lot of Bitcoin, but what does it mean? Okay, let me try to see, can I create a new kind of help you to build a new fusion of space kind of economy, right? So that's what I see a lot as well. So that's not quick money. Maybe that's not deep tech is not about quick money.
Okay. No, I think it was. I guess this is their moonshot, right? They made their money in Bitcoin, which has gone up so much, and in few other things. And then now they are interested. There's another twist to it, though. I think you probably are aware, and I also would love to get your inputs on that, right? So, one of the world's largest banks, JP Morgan Chase, in fact, did a blockchain transaction in space. And this was many years ago.
Yeah.
Right? With, I think, with GOM satellites at that stage. And now they have started working on with their blockchain platform, right, to look at space payments and building that out, right? Space settlements and etc. is what they're talking about. Any thoughts on that?
So I think that's what happened. I guess that's mainly for PR purposes, and I don't see any like kind of a real use case here. I think what's emerging and what I see a lot of like real use cases is like there's like more like internet is full of the things about Eric Schmidt bought relativity invested, now become a CEO to launch data centers in space, or Amazon is launching data centers in space. So there's Y Combinator now full of kind of these people who do something like, in space as well. So data centers in space is a good, there's a couple of, kind of use cases you can bring, right? First of all, like people say you can unlimited energy, right? You don't pollute Earth. There's you have faster kind of internet connectivity. It's cool there. You don't need to cool it down, right? This is questionable, by the way, in terms of engineering and physics. And physical security. FBI will not come to knock your door, right? So, and there's like potentially, there's no people who would like to kind of compromise your security, right? So that's happening a lot, and that's kind of what I see, like that, and of course, the payload which you want to bring to the data centers can be anything, right? It can be kind of some national security stuff. It can be resilience for your data. It can be kind of backups, or it can be like something as you mentioned, transactions in space for some specific reason. I'm not sure if you read this book, the Free Body Problem, very famous, about.
I saw the Netflix series.
Yeah. So they actually had data centers in space for this game, right? So they want to keep it very secure, right? So that's
It's an interesting conversation on that as well, right? And I'm not getting it without getting into geopolitics, but talking about the geo risks. Let me put it that way, right? And it's ironic using the term geo when we talk about space. But in the sense, when something breaks down, even in a remote part of the world, you're a few hours away, usually, like maybe 5 to 10 hours at most, where, from an accessibility perspective, even for the remotest sections, right, of the world where the data centers, etc. When it's in space, just your launch preparation is a few days, right? How do you see elements? And I'm not even talking about something that may be due to a military intervention or an attack which harms the satellites. That's weaponization of space, and there is a conversation to be had for that, but that's not the one I'm talking about. But fundamentally, any critical damages, let's just put as asteroid damage or something else that comes in, satellite debris. That's another big conversation on the junk, space junk, literally comes in, crashes in on this data center, damages something, right? How do you see that being addressed? And the BCP as with where the business continuity processing elements of it, because it's very expensive to have alternatives or have multiple layers of contingency in space. So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no. It's exactly the same. I guess thinking as you do like backups on Earth, but just a bit like it's a bit higher kind of degree level of risk, right? So for example, we do have data centers on Earth, which like in seismo-active zones with a lot of earthquakes, right? People still do that, and of course there's a backup. So and there's data centers get the first one to hit, right? If in case of war or kind of the climate crisis is also not helping right here. So I think it's that. So we as of today, actually, I don't think we have a proper industry standard for how to do it. I guess there's also what's the typical thing, like 3x backups, right? You normally do, but I guess it's maybe will be like 4 or 5. So I'm not a data center expert, but I see people see the benefit, and I think here as well. I think kind of that was not possible 10 years ago, right? Because that would be like extremely expensive. Because now with the current launch capabilities and current, like servicing,
Yeah.
in-orbit servicing, in-orbit robots, whatever you need to do, that's just becoming more, unit economics works more. Okay, if people will pay for that, let's calculate how much it will cost. Okay, our margin is here, right? So,
sure.
Like maybe data centers is like one of the examples, but the other use cases, for example, producing fiber, producing semiconductors in space, producing some of the pharmaceuticals. So the in-space manufacturing is up and coming area. And so many of my colleagues, like people who invest in space, they actually think that this is like the next big thing which will come out because, like ISS, the International Space Station, they have conducted like, I think 3,000 experiments in the last 20 years, kind of doing the different, okay, so let's try to do organoids, let's try to do cancer cells, stem cells, embryos, whatever, like, and many different materials as well. So what you have in orbit, if you have zero gravity or microgravity, we call it, extreme temperatures and vacuum, right? Something which extremely difficult to replicate on Earth. So one of the companies which I invested, for example, last year is a company which produces antibody cancer treatment in space. So like imagine, the protein crystal molecule, which is, it's a geometrically complex molecule. So it grows, it's very complex. So it grows and it collapses under its weight, under its gravity on Earth. But in space, it can grow bigger, more symmetrical and more pure as a structure. So, but when you produce it there, then, you have like a small robot, like a small lab, you can send it back. The crystal already formed, so it won't break. So then you can actually sell it. You can actually bring it to the hospitals, right? So, and then you think, okay, that's kind of, okay, what does it mean? But what it means for the patients is that instead of having a drip, they can do an injection.
Okay.
So you don't have to go to hospital for half an hour and have a nurse putting you a drip, but you can actually do an injection at home by yourself. So that's kind of, like the belly fat injection that people do, right? So that's changing the lifestyle. That's changing, the new patent for pharmaceutical companies, which we know they can sell more kind of stuff to hospitals and everything, right? So that's kind of this, and this is like such a small thing. Like you think about, oh, this is just zero gravity, but that's kind of changing the whole process, right? So, and that's many use cases like this, and people, and this database, by the way, is open source. Anyone go look at these experiments and see which one already have startup, which of them not. And what we see now is like, historically, space tech was full of founders, of engineers and scientists. But now we see people coming from other industries and they look at, okay, like what I could do, like, people like lawyers, people, like bankers, maybe like fintech, cyber entrepreneurs, they come in and it's the same happened in 1990s in internet, right, era. So first founders were all programmers and coders and we're like, okay, kind of, but then real businessmen, people, like real kind of founder, oh, actually this is like, this is the way how we can make money. So space a lot reminds me about internet of 1990s. So that kind of, like that's exactly the same dynamics in the founders. Yeah, so that's
it's building on that, right? And I think it'll be very useful for our audience, and also I'm learning so much. So thank you so much for taking out time on this in terms of the practicalities of the industry right now. So maybe a naive question, but taking the example of the drip versus the injection, the pharma product, right, in space, zero gravity, atomic impact, allows you to build a medicine or a pharma product in there. Now that would be a test, it's a trial, and you bring it back on Earth in, say, vacuum containers. I'm using a term very loosely, right? How scalable do you see this as? More, okay, we will do the trial and the conceptualization, not the conceptualization, but the building of this in space, and then bring it back on Earth and using vacuum infrastructure, using the term again loosely, can then build it. Because you now see there was this video doing the rounds a couple of weeks ago or a month ago of this factory in the US, which was just, there were no lights, because all robots working on it, and there were few lights, and it was all like computer manufacturing, right? So you can essentially have a very sanitized space, which is complete in a highly uh, and in semiconductor and pharma, you already have that, right? There's very big control on any human touch or impact. So we'd love to hear, are you seeing this as saying in 5 to 10 years time, and I'm talking about medium to longer term, there would be these pharma factories out there in space, and then the payload keeps coming back because there'll be multiple other SpaceXs, or do you see that more of a, here's a trial, this is now proven, so your Genesis pill as well as such would be built in space and then replicated on Earth?
Yeah, so I think there's several things to mention here. Like, first of all, right, as of today, we don't have any labs in space, right? So there's a couple of companies that are trying to build something like, we work in space, which is like Axiom,
Sure.
Starlab, like Vast. And by the way, Vast is a very famous company. They're founded by a crypto billionaire, right? So it's kind of close to your heart as well, right? So as of today, ISS is old, is small, it's extremely difficult to get. It's like you need to pay so much money to do any experiment there, right? And it's only experiments. There's no production, there's no production facilities. If you want to do a scale and you want to produce semiconductors or a lot of whatever you want to do, like organoids or the stem cells, kind of different options, right? Then you need to have almost like a lab. And which will be like, okay, someone will bring the kind of the new supply and bring down the product, right? And so companies like Varda, for example, which is a specifically they just raised, I think, Series C or whatever, quite late already. So they do only pharma in space. So and it's I think the second company, which was a space company, which was funded by Founders Fund after SpaceX, right? So that's that gives you also and the significance of that, right? So they're building their own capsules, right? So okay, something which will orbit the Earth while you need to how many months, days, whatever you need to have to finish this process you're building, right? And the other companies will just rent the space and just say, okay, we have our robots here, build special so the ISS is being decommissioned by 2030, but Elon Musk wants to do it even earlier, right? And it's now burning 6-7 billion a year, right? It's a lot of money to supply. So that the new stations would be more modern, more and then people we don't have to think about, I need to build a rocket and a station and then take it back. So this infrastructure already built for them, right? So you just book the SpaceX flight, then you hire this private station, whatever you need to have, one section, and then you have also so many companies do return capsules as well, including even Starship probably would be doing this as well, right?
Yeah.
You don't even need to hire a station. Maybe you can just ride share with a Starship.
Yeah.
So people only think about their own product, right? So the infrastructure is already there. This is exactly what Jeff Bezos was saying about the current space industry is about building the infrastructure. And you think about, so when he founded Amazon, he didn't need to found a post service, internet cables, under the everything was there already, right? So, and he just built the product. So what happened before was happening now as well, right? So this infrastructure is the internet cables, the post service, whatever, the phones, the telecom is already there. So we now need to think about products. That's why that's the wave of the entrepreneurship and startups. It's the new wave happening now, right? Second, think about, of course, there's a lot of wishful thinking for people to do everything in space just because I like space. That's comes to our due diligence process, right, as well. Okay, so is this real? Is that do we have to send something to space, or can we just send something once, do an experiment, and then try to replicate the same condition on Earth? And most of the cases, you don't even need to send something to space. You can just use AI to model that, right? And then you just basically say, okay, AI models, these proteins, molecule, whatever. Okay, so you need to use what is that? Is that the real gravity, or is that, can you use centrifuge, right? So like that's my kind of physics degree comes in, right? And also like, you know, my other people with PhDs in the team, right? So then we kind of start asking these questions of founders, like, you know, is it real or not? And to be honest, you know, 90% is not, right? So 90% is like, yeah, we can do it on Earth, we can do it like in different conditions. So maybe like 10% is what you know, like and in some cases, you know, I think that um, you know, even founders don't fully understand. So you have to kind of explain them, okay, so like, you know, how do you cut the cost, you know, and like, you know, why that have to be, if it's still a good idea, right? If you can use like, you know, I mean, it's great that space can give us these opportunities, but it doesn't mean we have to bring there, because, you know, then your margin just, you know, disappears, right? So
yeah, I think that's the other element as a relative, as a VC in a, I wouldn't call it as a new space, but a growing space where there's, you know, which is where the founders are more technical, right? Which is very true, which you also saw with biotech startups. You saw that with some AI startups where the founders are excellent PhDs and beyond, who are geniuses, but aren't thinking commercially, or are not exposed to the commercial mindset. I guess that's where all of your commercial and business expertise comes in to support them. I was also thinking, I guess there, you know, when we were talking about the ISS retiring soon or decommissioning, probably they will extend it for all we know, and as a possibility. I guess when we do start having these experiments and other private stations on in space, given the development of humanoids, I wouldn't be very surprised. I guess in 5 years, 10 years time, if these humanoids are stationed in these service centers, let's call it that, right? Who can be deployed on site to go fix something. Like I was giving that, you know, the data center damage one, or they could just be, you know, deployed on for doing annual maintenance instead of having the space, the dreaded or the fascinating spacewalk that the astronauts do, where there's such a high risk versus just using a robot to go do that, which maybe also be in a more controlled environment. Thoughts on that?
yeah, so I mean, if you've seen the latest, like, you know, Elon Musk video, like about the SpaceX vision, like a town hall, whatever it's called, right? So yeah, I mean the first people who will be on Mars would be humanoid robots, right? It's not going to be humans, right? Like, so,
Yeah.
like, and I think generally, like, you know, not just humanoids, but, you know, there's a lot of different robots, like, you know, space specific. Okay, so to kind of build something or to move some labs, or kind of, you know, like, you know, kind of whatever. You don't have to do like a lot of like things. You can just program like whatever your kind of small lab or small capsule you need to do like on Earth, and it does the things in space and then it comes back. You don't actually need to have like maybe specific robots, but probably 90% of the labor can be done by robots in space. You know, the space is not the nicest environment for people, right? It's harsh. So, and why do we bring people there taking the risk? You know, it's expensive. It's, you know, of course, space tourism you mentioned, maybe some kind of in the future, you know, the kind of anti-aging programs people are talking about, like, you know, in orbit, or like, you know, regenerating organs, you know, kind of getting yourself younger, whatever it is, right? So that's more like a leisure, right? It's not like a kind of labor. So yeah, no, that's what I mentioned at the beginning, right? You know, robotics advancements is now pushing space and deep tech generally forward a lot. It's accelerating this industry. Yeah.
Nice. Look, this has been a very fascinating conversation. I'm definitely going to bring you back again, and hopefully we'll see you in Hong Kong in person in the coming months, and we'll have that conversation, or I'll be in Singapore. Before we leave, you know, any startups in Asia that you are seeing who are doing a lot of work? I know you're primarily a US focused fund, but you're here in Asia, so it would be good to understand. I mean, maybe I'll break it down in two parts, and you can keep it concise if you wish. A, how are you seeing space tech evolve in Asia? I think deep tech we are building, so that's great, but space tech specifically. And secondly, any notable startups, either in your portfolio or otherwise, that you find fascinating in the current market for space tech?
Yeah, so Asia is booming in all aspects, right? So deep tech, space tech is like it's kind of a lot of things. So I think in Asia, I would say like there's a couple of clusters, right? So obviously the biggest one is China, and
Yeah.
China is over like last year, 2024, it's first time it overtook space tech investments, US. So
Okay.
that's
Wow. Okay.
it's a bit different the way how they do business, and we unfortunately don't invest in China because it's kind of we US focused, and I think it is this specific industry you have to be
Sure.
like focusing on like some specific markets, right? So India is another one, is big and upcoming. There's a 500 space tech startups. You know, they just
Okay.
launched the mission to the moon, right? Like was sort of
Yes.
nation,
Yeah.
right?
Chandrayaan. Yeah.
Another one is Japan, which is
Okay.
also big, and they just launched like a big fund, right? The government fund to support small, medium, and big space kind of companies. Um, uh, Australia is another big sector as well, which is kind of focusing a lot on deep tech and space. So in the Southeast Asia, where I'm my home country, I see a lot of sustainability, a lot of chip manufacturing, a lot of software projects. You know, by the way, when we talk space, about it doesn't have to be like hardware. Right? It can be software as well, right? So like a lot of, and which I read somewhere recently that 70% of the space tech startups are actually software startups, not hardware,
Okay.
right? So there's also opportunity for that. And a lot of people, what I see a lot is people are taking some satellite images, applying AI, and
Yeah.
doing some business cases for insurance companies, banks,
Mm.
commodity tradings, agriculture, whatever. So that's kind of, there's a lot of, because now we have a lot of images, better quality, we have optical, we have infrared, we have hyperspectral, we have SAR, we have like, so, and plus you have AI, right? And, like
Yeah.
you can do so many things, like, approve mortgages,
Yeah.
or kind of, monitor kind of greenhouse gases, right? So kind of all of this stuff, it's like now you can be like at home. You don't need to go and launch satellites. You just buy data and you build something. A lot of things happening like in Asia.
Yeah.
So I have invested in one company in Singapore, which is called Transcelestial. They do laser communication. So that's basically like the between satellites, you have laser,
Yeah.
and you kind of, for example, it would be like a data center to satellite. That will be,
Mm-hmm.
how do there's no cables, right? You have to use like laser. But they
Yeah.
also have a very strong business, telecom, which is like, last mile of telecom connectivity, actually also now done
Okay.
by laser. So which is like, and they have unique IP technology. So that's happening. I think in what I see, like, countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, they all have very strong interest, and they all have like very strong the kind of universities, budgets, government support, but it's very, I would say, like, it's still early stages. And of course the budgets are not exactly the same as like NASA budget, multi-billion, like, dozens of billions, or like ESA budget, or like China, right? It's even bigger.
Yeah.
But that's definitely something which, I don't think we'll see like another SpaceX big one, but it's like more, I guess, kind of small, like either software startups, or kind of some kind of, the supply chain kind of
Yeah.
specific startups. So that's, or even, if you do like a pharma, or like semiconductors production, like a small robots, again, you don't have to launch something big, right? You can do it like you can do it in a small country as well. So yeah, that's
Okay.
like, I mean, it's a good place to be. I mean, now it's a lot of innovation in that region.
Okay. That's very informative. And I'll keep an eye out for those. And yeah, I think it's a good point to make on the software versus hardware conversation. And that's one of the big strengths of Asia as well, from that perspective. Alexandra, this has been very, very, very interesting for me. And I look forward to having you again. But thank you so much for joining us today, and wishing you good luck for the moonshot that Beyond Earth is looking at. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Musheer. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Audience, stay tuned for such fascinating conversations. We just don't talk about financial services, but what is fueling the future of technology. Sign up if you haven't, and subscribe and follow us on our various social media. This is Musheer Ahmed from FinStep Asia, signing out.